I still remember to this day where I was when the PlayStation 5 was first announced. In fact, I was in this same exact room. I was reacting to the announcement trailer with one of my best friends, and there were so many questions that came up to mind after that announcement trailer. How much is it going to cost? Are we going to see a full, true next-gen experience? And is there going to be a significant boost in performance in comparison to the PlayStation 4? And honestly, a lot of those questions were answered, especially if you were fortunate enough to get a PlayStation 5. Luckily enough for me, my wife did find a link and we were able to get a day one PlayStation 5. But here we are 2 years later, and the PlayStation 5, I feel like, hasn't hit that full potential that it's capable of. And don't get me wrong, it's excelled at specific things, but there's still room for growth. And I know that there is much more that this console is capable of. Guys, if you like videos like this, like the video because likes are free after all, and it helps support the channel, and subscribe. That way you can go ahead and stay up to date. The first impression that I got from the PlayStation 5 was its overall size. I mean, this thing is absolutely massive in comparison to everything else that I have in my entertainment system. Don't get me wrong, I have a huge and massive gaming PC, but at the end of the day, this is something that should be in the living room and should kind of blend into everything else. This is the opposite of that. It is something that is going to go ahead and make a statement. And for those that aren't gamers, they might ask, what is this and what does it do? Visual design and statement aside, there are a lot of things that happen within the PlayStation 5 that were done purposefully, especially under the guidance of Mark Cerny and by getting feedback from developers. And without getting too technical with everything that's happening within the system itself, there are a lot of things that are happening within it that will go ahead and allow for not only better performance, but better development for the games themselves. Most of the internet, as well as the media, decided to focus specifically on the SSD on the PlayStation 5 when it was first announced. But there's actually a lot of things that are happening in the system on the chip, specifically the CPU and the GPU, and how they're handling everything that is happening within the game itself. Mark Cerny talked about having an integrated I/O, which would allow for invisible compression and decompression of games that are ported from PlayStation 4 onto the PlayStation 5. One of the biggest differences was seen in games like Subnautica, where it dropped down from 14 gigabytes of a file size to 4 gigabytes. Another great example would be Control Ultimate Edition, which went from being around 50 gigabytes to being around 25 gigabytes. Even Miles Morales, which saw a lot of up-res textures as well as a lot of different assets being added into the game, actually has a smaller file size on the PlayStation 5 than it does on the PlayStation 4. That's not to say that everything will go smoothly, but it just goes better for developers. And what that allows for us as gamers to experience are better games at the end of the day. As great as that custom SSD is, the 825 gigabytes of space that are within the console just wasn't enough for me and my family, so I decided to do a little bit of research and find an M.2 to install onto the PlayStation 5. It was relatively easy. All you really have to do is remove the faceplate, and then from there unscrew the expansion bay and install the M.2 SSD straight in there. The whole process takes about 10 minutes in order to get it done, but I did like being able to go online, do my own research, and find the SSD that better fit and suited my needs. Personally, I actually avoid Seagate as much as possible for my work. I don't like to work on them at all because I've had issues where Seagate hard drives failed on me in the past. Obviously, SSDs is a different conversation entirely, but I digress. There's actually been a lot of talk on the internet about whether or not next gen, or technically current gen consoles with the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X should have 60 FPS as the target for games that are released in today's time. As someone that goes ahead and plays on PC from time to time, this kind of makes me a little bit sad, especially seeing as how this generation started out with the games having either a fidelity mode or a performance mode, or in some instances like Ratchet & Clank, finding a middle ground where you could get 40 FPS and have 4K if you have a TV that supports 120 Hertz. When I saw this and experienced it firsthand, I was honestly kind of happy. I was okay with this, being able to play this game, have everything load and run smoothly, and not have any sort of like hiccups, but still have something that is a little bit better than 30 FPS, but not as smooth as 60 FPS. I was honestly fine with it. This begs the question as to whether or not this is going to be going away. Are we going to lose that option of being able to choose between fidelity or performance? Personally, I like having my frames. I like being able to experience it in the smoothest way possible, and I'm okay dropping down the resolution to 1440p or 1080 in order to allow that to happen. That happy medium that was found with Ratchet & Clank is honestly really nice as well, and it is a nice kind of midpoint in order to get performance and resolution. But at the end of the day, I would still prefer 60 FPS if possible. One of the hot keywords that we used in marketing back in the day was immersion. And frankly, it's still being used today for game development and kind of design philosophy in terms of what game developers can go ahead and do. But immersion is when you kind of forget about everything around you and you're within the game and you're immersed within the game. If you don't have a 5.1, 7.1 surround sound system, having headphones allows for better immersion. And having a dedicated chip on your PlayStation 5 that processes all of that audio helps for a much better, richer audio experience. I am personally not an audiophile, but I do know people that take audio very, very seriously. When it came to the PlayStation 5 3D audio headset, I knew that I was in for a treat when I slapped those bad boys on and I started playing Returnal. Returnal is honestly one of those games that really truly harnesses the potential of having 3D audio. I just hope that more developers take advantage of this tool in the toolkit that is being given to them in order to allow for better immersion and better experiences in the gaming space. One of the biggest things with the PlayStation 5 that allows for it to feel more next gen, if you were to call it that, would be the DualSense. There's a level of magic that comes with the immersion that is provided through haptic feedback. And yes, the battery is absolutely atrocious in the DualSense. It barely lasts long playthroughs. And honestly, I don't know if the DualSense or the Nintendo Switch have a better battery life. I would have to figure that out. But at the end of the day, I know that this DualSense will allow me to experience games in a different way than I could experience on any of the other platforms that are out there. That's not to say that the DualSense is perfect by any means. I mean, I already talked about the atrocious battery life, but the D-pad itself is definitely subpar in comparison to other platforms. If you're into fighting games, I would recommend getting your fighting game on another platform. Personally, I prefer getting my fighting games on PC and using an Xbox Series X/S controller or the SN30 Pro. That is my personal go-to. I just like the way that that D-pad feels. And honestly, whenever I tried a fighting game using the DualSense, it just definitely left a lot to be desired. A nice touch that I like to see in the DualSense is mainly seen from first-party developers, but whatever's happening on screen kind of goes ahead and coincides with the LED that you see on the DualSense. Personally, I like stuff like that. It's a nice little touch and just kind of adds a little bit more immersion on things. The speaker that's on the DualSense feels just like the speaker that was on the DualShock 4, but one thing that they did add into it was a microphone. Personally, I don't play too many games that need or require me to use my voice to communicate with other players, but it's still a nice to have feature. And frankly, honestly, if you are into that, it's just something that you can go ahead and use. Personally, I always have my mic turned off anyways as is. Will we see a PlayStation 5 Pro somewhere down the line? Yes, maybe, probably, but I don't see that happening anytime soon. All of the supply chain issues that we've seen due to 2020 and everything that happened over there, we're still feeling the effects of that even today. With the holiday season, I hope that Sony can go ahead and ramp up production of these consoles so that more gamers that want to go ahead and buy a PlayStation 5 can. And pretty much everything that I've seen online is pointing towards that. It seems like there are more and more people that are saying, hey, there's plenty of PlayStation 5s here, there, and everywhere. I just haven't personally seen that myself. So we'll see what happens. But let me know what you think in the comments below. I love to hear your thoughts on the video, as well as whether or not you have a PlayStation 5. And if you did get one, how did you get it so that more people can go ahead and get them? Obviously, like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you on the next one. Till next time, guys. Peace.